Anxiety, how common is it in young people? So I've got some stats here that I think are important to share. In the general population, you'll see, anxiety affects a quarter or 25% of the global population. It's more prevalent in females, so it's more common in girls, in 19.1% of the population overall, whereas it affected 23.4% of females and 14.3% of males. It is highly comorbid with substance abuse, which means it occurs often with substance abuse as well as depression, which is important because depression is also one of the mental illnesses that we're looking at in our question today. And how does this compare to how common anxiety is in young people? Well, globally, 2.6% of adolescents or teenagers suffer from depression, and this increases over the course of adolescence. In terms of anxiety tends to emerge very early on, so it tends to emerge during childhood and adolescence. So it actually occurs even earlier than depression. And as you can see in the second bullet point, Sadler, in a study in 2018, compared the prevalence of anxiety in 2004 and 2017 and found a big increase amongst adolescents or teenagers, which indicates that anxiety has become increasingly common in the last few years. And therefore, this does suggest that there is an epidemic of anxiety and depression amongst young people. So let's move on to depression. So the general population versus young people, let's go again. Globally, 350 million people suffer from depression, according to statistics from the World Health Organization in 2017. It's the single most burdensome disease in the world, which means it causes the most problems, both individually, socially, emotionally, and on a societal level. It's more common among women, and over half of people with major depression will go on to have further causes of major depression later in life or relapses. It's more common in people from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and it's more common among lonely people or people who feel isolated and alone. And in young people, as we said before, 2.6% of adolescents, which is quite high, that's 1 in 50 adolescents suffer from depression, which increases over the course of adolescence. So you're more likely to experience depression the older you get in that teenage window. It's the greatest risk period for the onset of depression. So between the ages of 13 to 18 years of age, that is the period at which you are most at risk of developing depression. So that's definitely worth bearing in mind. So these are some really interesting stats as well. 50% of all mental disorders are established by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 18. So clearly, teenage years and adolescent years are very, very strongly associated or correlated with these disorders occurring and starting. So being an adolescent or being a teenager in itself is a risk factor for developing depression and anxiety. And amongst children and adolescents or young people, anxiety and depression are the most common mental disorders. That's also worth mentioning. The third bullet point is really important. The prevalence of anxiety and depression has increased by 70% in the past 25 years in young people. And it's worth mentioning the adverse outcomes that these have on development in adolescence. So these include things like dropping out of school, having impaired social relationships, increased risk of substance abuse, mental health problems other than anxiety and depression, and things like suicide.